Thank you, Ricardo, for putting this together. And thank you, Professor Chris, for a wonderful presentation. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Great. Professor Ricardo and Professor Chris also mentioned one very important thing about systems. They said, why it is difficult to change systems, and why it is difficult to, why we are not able to address systemic problems sometimes. So there are a lot of factors that are contributing to this, and one of them could be behavior change. Sometimes changing in systems or system level problems requires change in the mindset, and we, not just one person, but we have to change the mindset of a large group of people. So that could be one of the reasons. So I want to highlight this or explain a little bit about this, about the system from behavior change perspective. So So systems, as we know, is group of interacting elements, interrelated elements, and sometimes, as a Professor Chris said, it could be a complex phenomena. And this phenomena, if we have to bring a change the system, then it's difficult because these elements are related to each other. Changing one element could bring change on the other side or other component of the system or other group. That could be a problem, and there could be different levels that are there, different parameters that are there, and the relationships are also different between these elements. So it's challenging to bring a change in this system sometimes. In systems, it has been seen often that some of these, when we are thinking about change, it often requires change in the mindset or group of the people. And so change in their behavior is also required. And then when we're talking about change in mindset behavior, then there are a lot of factors that are associated with that. So it could be the barriers, existing norms, cultural, social cultural environment, the habits that are there, economic factor. There are various other factors that are directly, indirectly related to behavior. Okay. So without changing this mindset, it's difficult to change the system. Okay. And I want to highlight this or explain a little bit more about this from the perspective of an example, by taking an example, and from the perspective of global problem like climate change and consumption. So, okay. So looking at the global problem of sustainable consumption. So just to quickly highlight the issue here, we have lost about half of our wildlife in past 40 years, and the role and the rate of extinction is also increasing drastically. And by looking at the rate of biodiversity loss, researchers have kind of already said that or concluded also that by 2050s, all ocean species would disappear, and we are going through the phase of sixth mass extinction that will be over within this century by looking at clearly the rate of biodiversity loss. Okay. So let's try to understand what factors are contributing to this also. So there are a lot of factors that contribute to this, like habitat loss, greenhouse gas emissions, climate change, deforestation, and there are many other that are there. And majorly, it's because of human activities, human actions that are contributing to this. When we look at human actions that are contributing to this, so there are. Is it possible to move this? There are a lot of so it's mainly because of the consumption. When we talk about consumption means using of resources. Consumption means everything that we use, that we consume, that has an impact on the environment. So energy, food that we consume, fuel that we use, resources. It's also related to all kind of products and housing and transport. Everything kind of falls under the umbrella of consumption because everything has environmental impact associated. So when we buy a product, the environmental impact of that product is astronomical. It, because we're talking about the extraction of the material, the impact related to that, the transportation, manufacturing, distribution, end of life disposal, and there are even if it goes for recycling, there are emissions produced. So there is throughout there is impact that is associated with the entire life cycle of the product. So every dollar we spend, every product we buy, every service that we use has some kind of impact that's there. And we have seen it that in past 100 years, this consumption has increased drastically, exponentially. So this consumption, human consumption is contributing to greenhouse gas emissions, and that is also directly contributing to climate change. So consumption is one of the major factor here. Now, when we look at it from global consumption perspective, if we look at per capita consumption of carbon, that means global carbon emissions per capita, um, carbon produced by per person average globally, it's 4.7 tons, okay, per year. That means on an average, every person produces 4.7 tons of carbon. Okay. Now, this there are a lot of factors that are here, a lot of elements of consumption that are there. So food, housing, transportation also contributes, goods, products that we use, appliances that we use, leisure, services, okay, all those are contributing to this. If we have to limit the climate change or the temperature rise to 1.5 degrees, ideally we want it to be 2.5 tons per person. That's and that should be achieved by 2030. And by 2050, it should come to zero point 0.7 tons of carbon per person. But this is challenging because it's related to a lot of factors related to lifestyle, behavior. And we can clearly see that it requires change not only in technology but also in lifestyle. So let's look at this a little bit more from systemic perspective. Consumption is related to several other systems, subsystems, elements directly or indirectly. For example, it's related to socio-economic system, social status. Okay? It's the way we consume, what we buy, what car we have, houses, things, clothes, shoes, everything also has a meaning, social meaning. So it contributes to socio-economic status and many other, factors, social factors. Social norms also influence consumption practices. Lifestyle, high and low. There are high consumption lifestyles. In some regions, there are low consumption lifestyle. So they have different impact. Education, we're talking about social foundation here also. Everyone should have a fair space. There should be a fair space where everyone should be able to meet their basic needs and have access to decent quality of life and resources. So we're talking about that. Human impact discrepancies are there, where the impact of consumption is also varying from a person to person. It's also related to income. The richest 10% of the population of the world contributes to 50% of carbon production, whereas the poorest 50% is contributing to 10%, is responsible for 10% of the carbon production. So there is difference there. There's difference also in terms of economic inequalities, and then we're talking about economic system that we have that also drive this consumption. So there are a lot of factors that are in this system that are directly or indirectly related to consumption. While there are several leverage points here that we can target, that we can look at and see how we can make those tweaks in those to change this system or to improve this. So one of them is definitely behavior. When we look at behavior, consumption behavior, why we consume the way we do, then again, there are a lot of factors that are directly, indirectly associated. So social influence, social context, social group in which we are living, that is one of the major factor. Attitude, awareness, education, cost, convenience, motivation, technology, a lot of things that are directly and indirectly influencing our consumption behavior. Also beliefs, values, many other. Happiness, there is research which says people consume more because they think that would lead to happiness, but it may not be so. So that is also there. And accessibility and many other factors. So how do we change this consumption behavior, this mindset, the way we consume? There are different approaches. There are radical approaches, and I will not go through all of those. There are many which says uh, many emerging radical approaches which are more forceful, coercive, and which focus on restricting or kind of allocating certain resources, dividing those also. For example, carbon rationing. What if we have the remaining amount of carbon that we still can produce divide among the population of the world? So per capita carbon, so that would be carbon rationing. So we have limit in how much carbon we can produce, every person. Then there could be cap on spending. There are a lot of other regulatory approaches that could be there, and these have been developed by different research bodies and organizations. So that's one way of changing the behavior, and that works. And we have seen many examples: traffic systems, rules. Those are also there that work this way, more forceful, coercive. There's another way. What if everyone becomes more conscious of their consumption? If we all know our consumption behavior and consumption and our lifestyle impact, and if we all can be, everyone on the planet can become more conscious about their consumption, then that can also solve the problem. That's another way of looking at it. But how do we address this? How do we bring this change where everyone becomes more conscious, and then that would set up new norms and culture where everyone is expected to behave in a more sustainable way? So it's challenging. So we can do this if it was so easy. Like, it's possible, but there is a gap in this. If we want to be more conscious about our consumption, if everyone has to behave in a sustainable way, there is a problem, there is a gap, and I want to highlight that. There is a disconnect. There is a disconnect, clear disconnect between our actions and the environmental impact. If somehow we can design more system-based interventions that could address this disconnect, then that would help us in changing the lifestyle and behavior. Let me explain. So generally, if we want to improve a system, if we want to bring a change, the approach we adopt is we say we want to know two main things: where we are, the baseline assessment, where we are currently, what are our practices right now, what is the impact. So we want to know that part, the current situation, existing business as usual. So we want to know that. We also want to know what is our goal, where we want to reach, where we want to be. If we know these two things, then we can backtrack and we can find steps on ways in which we can reach there. Okay? So if we know these two things, we can figure out what can take us there, how we can reach there. But when we talk about consumption behavior from individual level, from individual's perspective, there is a disconnect here. We do not know where we are. As an individual, we do not know what is our impact, what is our carbon impact, or what is the impact of our lifestyle on the global issue. So that information is kind of missing, or is not in a way in which we can understand easily. So that's there. Then there is a disconnect. We also do not have much clarity at individual level of where exactly we want to be. So there is a disconnect there. Okay. Let me explain this a little bit more. What is this disconnect? So this disconnect is between lifestyle and its related environmental impact. People cannot relate their impact, their actions with the environmental impact. They cannot see the direct, immediate impact of any of their actions. So products they buy, services they use. So if I'm buying a product, I cannot see any impact of that product. Then it's difficult to change. When we cannot see, then it will be difficult to change the behavior. We also cannot see how our actions are contributing to this environmental issue, global problem. So we cannot see any positive change with the adoption of sustainable practices. So if I'm adopting sustainable practice, recycling, composting, or any other, or buying less, I cannot see any positive change. It's not visible to me. I want to see what is the impact or the contribution I have made in past 1 month by adopting these practices. So this is also one gap that's there. Another is that the global data that we have it should be presented in a way or translate it in a way which is more meaningful, which makes sense for every individual, which kind of is action oriented, which helps us in our decision making process, which informs our decision making process or assist, and it would help us in changing our lifestyle. So this translation of global data is also important. We also want this information to be accessible all the time, and every time it should be readily available. That would influence our decision making process. We also want to know what is the permissible limit. Where do we stand right now as an individual? And what is our permissible limit? How much we can impact we can create, or within the sustainable framework, or within the capacity of the planet. So what are my overshoots in terms of lifestyle impact? What is my target? So we want to know all this at individual level. And then another thing that's missing is the sense of responsibility and kind of contribution to this collective global action. People want to feel that they are not the only one contributing to this. They want to see everyone around them acting also. So that is an important part of this. Social proof, visibility of others' actions, monitoring. These are important part. These are also kind of missing. So there is this disconnect, huge disconnect between individuals' lifestyle and actions and the global impact that it has. We need to look at how we can bridge this, how we can design more system level interventions that would address this. So there are these questions in mind that everyone has. Are my actions affecting the environment? If yes, how much? I want to know that. How much I am consuming? What is the impact of my actions, my lifestyle on climate change? Which actions have more impact? I want to know that so that I can change those actions. What is the permissible limit? What I need to change? How much I need to change? All those. And if I adopt more sustainable action, what is the positive change that will bring? And I also want to see how I am doing with respect to others. Is everyone else contributing or not? Am I worse than others? So there are these questions that are also there in individuals' mind, everyone's mind, directly, indirectly. Yeah. So with this gap, with this disconnect, clear disconnect that's there, it's difficult to expect a change in lifestyle. So it's important to look at how we can, with different interventions. There is no one solution. We can look at different ways in which we can redesign or think from system perspective to address this disconnect. So there are certain things that we can consider. For example, we can look at assessing the environmental impact of products and services. So there are tools and everything, technology that's available that will help us in assessing the environmental impact associated with products and services. So that should be done. And then that information should be available to individuals, users, everyone. That would help us in decision making. So we know whatever we are buying, consuming, services that we are using, what is the impact of that environmental impact? That should be clearly mentioned. Then we also want to know the impact. We should These interventions that we're thinking, it should also account the impact of every action. So if people are living in certain way, buying certain things, or consuming certain way, they should be able to see the net impact, maybe monthly, maybe per day, maybe from every object, everything that we buy, the net impact of every action should be clearly visible. Okay, so that should also be there. Then so we should account that this system that should be there should account for every action. Then we should also compare individuals' lifestyle impact, the net impact, with permissible limits, with our goals, to tell people where they are, how much they need to improve further, and what are the steps they can take. Okay, so that should be there. Overshoot, if it's there, then how much it is. So we need to design more system-based interventions to address this disconnect. Energy meters can, for example, energy meters can communicate the impact of energy use on climate change of an individual or a family. Thermostats maybe communicating more impact based also information. communicating the impact of energy use in climate change. So how people are contributing to climate change, that could be there. We can redesign electric appliances and other system level also interventions. So we need to show people, we need to see also ourselves also, where do we stand. We want to see we want to see that very clearly what is the environmental impact of our actions, then we can, then our behavior would change. Yeah. So we want to see maybe a monthly score, maybe just like the way we see our credit scores or banking information, that is based on our cumulative financial actions activities, so it kind of accumulates that. So it could be that way. We also want to know domain wise breakdown of our actions, so which actions had higher impact, which had lower impact on lifestyle impact, environmental impact. So we want to know that. And we also want to know it real time, ideally, if whatever we do and we can immediately see the impact or change on climate, that would be great. That would be very influential if we can see immediate consequences of our action. So we can look at some of these things and see what we can do. So interventions that system level interventions that communicate clearly the lifestyle impact could be very useful. So if there could be something that tells us the monthly impact, so for example, carbon footprint for this month, how much was it? Based on our lifestyle, every action has been accounted here. So that could be very influential. So for example, here it shows that for this user, the average carbon footprint for this month, that is month of December, was 395 kilograms of carbon for this month. So it also shows comparison with previous month. So he was able to reduce by 11 kilograms compared to previous month, and then it also shows how far he is from the target. The green line that you see is target for 2030. So he knows that he needs to come to 211 kilograms carbon for every month, like monthly average. So it's more clear kind of communication. Okay. Then what we also want is, if we are able to see our monthly, like every month or maybe day wise, the impact, where is it coming from? Exactly, every action. That would be very helpful. So for example, it would be great if we can zoom in and see where is this impact coming from. So food, housing, transport, goods, services, leisure activities. So we can zoom in and see. And then we can also see, for example, in case of food, where is that impact coming from? So we can see, meat or dairies contributing significantly. So we can provide, tips to people on what they can do to kind of minimize that. So having more action oriented specific information would be very helpful. So this could be, we can see how this information could be available. It could be in products directly communicating. It could be a system that kind of accumulates everything and shows per day, per action impact. That would be also useful. So we can look at various ways in which this can be communicated to users. But what we want is that information should be directly available to every individual, and global data should be translated at individual impact level, and it should be available all the time at the point of decision making. So we need these system based interventions if we have to address this disconnect, or if we have to bring change in these complex systems and situations. Design is best positioned to drive this change with the tools that we have, co-creation tools, approaches that we have, prototyping, visualization skills, and everything. Design is best positioned to drive this change. We have the capability to understand systems. We have tools. We have approaches to understand and bring change in these systems. So besides this, there are other factors also that would contribute. So we should think about these system level interventions and also think about technological improvements. And if that goes along with system and infrastructure, then that can help us in bringing this change, or driving this more sustainable lifestyle. Thank you.